at Port State Bank and the Port Park and Rec
For bikes?
for bikes. And we're doing 0 to 100. We have categories for all participants. So if you have a trike, a bike, a wheelchair, a scooter, something that you would like to participate in, we will be doing that after the presentation at the band shell.
Alderman Gasper and I will shoot up to Pop Shop on our Schwinns, grab a couple of baseball cards, and we'll make some noise on our bikes. You in?
Yeah.
All right, deal. Okay, thank you for that. And Mary Lou, thanks for your leadership with the Legion. Okay, next is officer and staff reports. Melissa.
Just a couple things. Our 4th of July fireworks are on July 3rd. We wanted to do that so we could also have everyone go see other fireworks in our region and people could enjoy a couple fireworks shows. So mark your calendar for that. And there are no department head reports in July. We take that pause and then we will start those back up in August, and those will be on the city's website under my page as normal. And also we have about 100 summer staff. So if you see new staff around, say hello. We finally got them all onboarded, and they're in their training or at the parks, the pool, sort of everywhere right now. So welcome them so they come back, because we have very good return rates for our summer help. And that's all. Thanks.
Okay, any questions for Melissa? All right, seeing none, then that takes us to new business, which is our financial audit report presented by Clifton Larson Allen LLP. Here we go.
And as he moves that up there by him, Mark isn't here tonight. We had a little schedule conflict, so I will try to field any questions that Brian can't answer. And if we can't answer, we will get those answers to you from Mark when he returns.
Melissa, on page 22, section 7.
Yes.
Totally
Had that
kidding.
prepared.
Totally kidding.
Perfect. I'm Brian Grunewald of CLA. Thank you for having me here this evening. Before we get started, I do have the PowerPoint here. Is that going to be shared up on the screens? All right. Thank you very much. Okay, and again, thank you for having me here this evening. I do want to thank Mark and your team for the cooperation and assistance that we received throughout the audit process. Obviously, a lot going on within the city when you think of some of the construction projects that are going on. Certainly the new implementation of the software system adds some complexity to the audit. So certainly want to thank everyone for their cooperation and assistance throughout the process. This is really intended to be a real brief overview. The information that I have for you in front of you here is really pulling information from both the audited financial statements, the bound document that you received, as well as the governance communication letter. If you have questions on either of those as I'm going through the discussion, certainly please feel free to ask. This first slide, I just wanted to give you a real brief overview of the different reports that are included within the audit. On pages 1 through 4 of your financial statements, we have the auditor's report on the basic financial statements. That is considered to be an unmodified opinion. Essentially means that I believe that your financial statements are complete and accurate and in accordance with our professional standards. In addition, we also have a report on internal control. That's on pages 8. It begins on page 80 of your financial statements. Just as a reminder, we do not issue an opinion on your internal control structure. We do try to gain an understanding of your internal control structure. Think of that as how things are done, how you handle cash, how you pay your bills, how you process payroll, for example. We like to have that understanding so that we can properly plan and perform the audit. There is no opinion on that, but when we become aware of conditions, we're required to disclose those and present those. So you do see the reference to 2 findings that are described within your financial statements. The first one there being finding 2024-1, adjustments to the city's financial records. And that's just disclosing that as part of the audit process, we look at a lot of financial information. It is common for us to disclose and propose adjustments. We've done that. We did have a couple that rose to the level of requiring communication. So we do have that comment, adjustments to the city's financial records. And I just do want to emphasize all adjustments that I'm aware of, again, are included within your financial statements. So again, I do believe that those are complete and accurate. And then we also do have a second finding, 2024-2, segregation of duties. I know we've talked about this in the past. When you go through your transaction cycles or think of those transaction cycles, we always like to consider the number of people that are involved, the number of controls that are involved. And because of the size of the city and your accounting function, we just have a comment related to segregation of duties. I think it's something that you should continue to be aware of. Certainly management and the council both provide oversight with regards to your finances. I just want to make you, again, aware of that condition. And we do get into the details of that quite a bit as we go through the audit and the audit process with Mark. Again, very common. We've been talking about that for the last few years. Before I move on to the next slide, any thoughts, questions, comments with regards to those findings or your audit opinion? Nope. Okay. Then this next slide, it's titled as the governance communication. And I referenced that other governance communication document. The purpose of this slide is just to give you an overview of that letter. It is information that we are required to communicate as part of the audit process. Therefore, when you get into the details, or if you get into the details, the terminology and the language is very standardized. It's also very consistent with what you've seen in the past. A lot of these topics have been disclosed in the past as well. The highlights or areas that I'd like to emphasize under the topic of accounting practices and accounting policies, we do continue to implement new accounting standards. So there's references in both reports with regards to a new governmental accounting standard. It's standard number 101 related to compensated absences. I just wanted to highlight that because you will see that reference throughout the reports. We implemented that because we're required to. Again, in the middle of the slide there, you'll see the reference to audit adjustments. All adjustments that I'm aware of are included in your financial statements. And then the last item that I just wanted to comment briefly on is the management representation letter. As a part of the audit process, it's our standard practice to provide a letter. Again, the purpose of that is to make sure that we've received all of the information that we've requested as a part of the audit process. That is presented on the city's letterhead and included within this letter. So I just wanted to point that out and mention that it is attached to the back of this letter. That's our standard practice, and sometimes I get questions on that because it is, again, on your letterhead, so it sticks out a little bit. So if there are any topics either in that letter, on the slide in front of you, I'd be more than happy to talk about anything else further. Other than those couple highlights that I mentioned, really nothing that I consider to be a red flag, nothing unusual, really just standard communication. And again, because it's required, I just wanted to emphasize that. Okay, seeing none, I will continue to move forward. Then I just wanted to take an opportunity to touch base on a few of the pieces of financial information. The next couple of slides we're going to look at all relate to your fund balance. Think of that as the reserves, what you have left at the end of the year. And this slide is focusing on your general fund. I always like to look at the history of where you've been and where you're headed. At the end of 2024, you can see that you had approximately $3.7 million in overall fund balance reserves. That's the sum of both those categories under the 2024 column. If I compare that back to 2023, your fund balance and your reserves from 2023 to 2024 did increase slightly, meaning the sum of all your revenues exceeded your expenses. The increase was $57,533. If we back up a little bit, you can see how you've had some significant increases, both going from 2022 to 2023, and then also from 20 to 2021. Just as a reminder, I know we've talked about these in the past, you've had some one-time, non-recurring type accounting transactions that have happened. And I just wanted to point those out because that's really the cause for some of those significant increases. So for example, from 22 to 23, we had an accounting change with your health reimbursement arrangement, your HRA liability. So we did have an accounting adjustment for that. That's really what caused that significant increase from 22 to 23. And then again, back in 2021, you also had another similar non-recurring type transaction. So the message with that is keep focusing on your budget. I know you guys paid close attention to that. And again, your results for 2024 were that your fund balance reserves increased at $57,000.
Brian, how does that $3.6 million make you feel in terms of the reserves that we've got?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to lead right into the next slide because it really leads into this slide. And really, from a benchmarking perspective, and to answer your question, it's really common to look at the amount of unassigned fund balance you have, essentially reserves that aren't committed or tied to any other specific purpose, to look at that unassigned fund balance and compare it to the amount of expenditures flowing through your budget. Your policy for your general fund is 20%. So that's the red line on there. When I look at your actual results, you can see how you've increased from 2021, 2023, 2024. The last couple of years being in that 33, 34% range. To answer your question, I would say it's very strong and consider it in comparison to your policy. Your policy is very appropriate. It's in a normal range. Other outside benchmarking, things like the Government Finance Officers Association, they'll talk a lot about 15 to 25%. So your policy is right in the middle of that. I see strong fund balance reserves based on your policy and based on all those factors. I will say all the communities that I talk to, they're all thinking about their budget. They're all trying to prioritize needs. So I think having that fund balance is certainly a positive and gives you a little bit of flexibility. So overall, great shape.
And along with that, are you going to get to OPEB in here, or is that just a specific thing?
I wasn't going to, but if you have a question, I'd certainly be happy to jump into
with
that.
such a healthy fund balance, because to me that's too healthy, and then our OPEB liabilities also seem pretty. Our funds in there seem very strong too. That we could cover all those liabilities with our cash on hand, as well as pay as you go here. What were your thoughts on that when you reviewed it?
So here's what I would do. I would think about your policy, and I think the fact that you're over your policy in terms of that fund balance percentage, I think that gives you a lot of flexibility. And I think you could certainly go through and think about needs. If you wanted to use some of that fund balance and bring that percentage down a little bit, you certainly could. I would just warn that you use it for preferably like one-time, non-recurring type needs, because if you use it for something that's built into your budget, the question that you're going to have the following year is how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah, it should never be used to supplant.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
I think we have a really strong financial position, and there's a point at which when you're 15% or 13.5% above your policy,
Yeah.
that can swing not so good the other way, because we have enough cash on hand to run payroll and
Yeah.
bridge overall revenue.
Yeah. And the only other thing I would like to emphasize or stress as part of that, and certainly as you get into your budget, you'll see this, having a stronger fund balance means you've got more cash on hand. And if you think of interest rates and how you've been able to put that into savings accounts and invest that, you've done very well on the budget side with regards to the interest income that you've been able to generate too. So just as a reminder, if you use some of that cash, bring that fund balance down, you're definitely going to want to take a look at the interest earnings part of your budget and just make sure you're planning for that as well.
Okay. The little fiscal conservative in me is about to go off, but I'm just going to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Then we just have a few other slides here that focus on the reserves, the fund balance, reserve balance in some of your other funds. This slide just focusing on your special revenue funds. Again, you can see the comparison for the balances at the end of the year. I'm just going to jump down to the totals. You can see at the end of 2023, you had approximately 1.7 million. That did increase up to just under 1.9 million at the end of 2024. I'm not going to walk through all these, but if you look at the comparison, certainly positive increases in a lot of those categories on there as you work down that slide. So again, just trying to give you some perspective on what are your balances at the end of the year. Then also similarly, just wanted to touch base real quickly with regards to both your debt service fund as well as your different capital projects funds. As a reminder, your debt service fund balance, that is restricted for future principal and interest payments. And then we move into the capital projects. The capital and special projects funds, you can see how that balance has fluctuated. You were at 4 million, now you're up to 7.3. Just as a reminder, when you get into capital projects fund, it is very common to see fluctuation. Think about timing of when you issue debt, particularly versus when you spend that. So you did have a significant debt issue near the end of 2024. So you've got some of that cash and some of those unspent debt proceeds on hand. So that's really what's driving that capital and special projects fund increase. And then just again, moving into the tax incremental districts. As a reminder, the numbers in brackets, it's there for TID district number 3. Those are in brackets because they are in a deficit, but the size of that deficit did get reduced. I know I went through all those fund balances pretty quickly. Any thoughts, questions, comments on any of those? Okay. And then I also just wanted to take a moment to talk about, how we're looking forward. I feel like every year that I've come here for the last several years, we've talked about governmental accounting standards. Because you are a municipality, you're required to follow those standards. They have been very busy in terms of the standards that they've issued. Just giving you some perspective on some of the standards that are in the pipeline, and you will be required to implement these over the course of the next couple of years. I'll make sure that we stay close and working with Mark and your team to make sure that they're properly implemented when you're required to implement those. And then the last comment on there is grants and ARPA compliance. Again, just as a reminder, whenever we think about federal, state funding and ARPA specifically, a lot of discussion on our side with regards to things like compliance, eligibility of expenses, what are the reporting requirements that you have to work through. We do spend time talking to Mark and working through some of that from an audit perspective. As an example of that, for 2024's audit, we did spend some additional time looking at and testing the ARPA funding that you've received for 2024. And just wanted to give you some assurance that we did look at that. No issues, no concerns with regards to ARPA, specifically for the 2024 audit. And that's all that I had prepared. So if you have any other questions, I certainly would be happy to answer anything further.
Ms. Miller?
So how many years has your company been doing the audit?
Here, it's, I would guess around 5 or maybe slightly more than that.
Okay. And how many years have you been suggesting updating our cash handling policies and procedures?
Are you referring to the comment?
The exception.
So I just want to circle back. So on page 9 of this governance communication letter,
Right.
I just want to kind of step back from an audit standpoint. This is the first year we've had a comment in your letter to answer your question specifically. I just want to talk about what we normally look at from an audit standpoint. When I was talking earlier about internal control and how things are done,
Right.
we focus on the processes that flow through your finance department and your accounting function because that's the majority of your transactions. Now, as we went through this year's audit, we did talk more about what I'm going to say, some of your other cash collection points. Think about Park and Rec, think about Marina, so we did take a little bit deeper dive and visit some of those other departments this year. We don't always do that, and we hadn't done that, so we hadn't issued this type of comment
Okay.
in the past. So I just wanted to give you some background on that,
No,
answering your question.
I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Melissa?
That's a really great question, and that is a discussion that I had with Brian early on, because anytime we know there's cash, having checks, especially if there's kids or other people involved. So senior center, rec, and I don't know if they did you go to the marina, but those two particularly, I had wanted them to look at. So we're working on adjusting those policies and how we're handling those.
A good audit, however, is one of the most important key performance indicators we have for our finances and the flow of cash. And this is a finding that, hopefully, like you said, it'll be resolved, but thank you for that. As long as we don't have, like the old days where there'd be a Folgers can of quarters sitting in a janitor's desk for 3 weeks. Any other questions on this? Otherwise, this is a non-actionable item. Is information correct? Okay. All right, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Well done. That brings us into 10A or 10C, consideration of possible action on approving a request for a proposal for the redevelopment of the downtown police and fire block at 101 West Washington Street and 365 North Wisconsin Street. The issue is, should the attached RFP for the redevelopment of the police and fire block be approved and released for official solicitation? And the staff recommends approving the RFP. Before I turn it over to Bob and Melissa, I just wanted to state that this is something I had asked for a while back, once we knew we were going to do the new safety center on the west side, really because I do not want our city to be in a position where we have vacated municipal buildings for a day longer than we have to, because it's a liability that we carry. We have to maintain them, we have to heat them, we have to clean them, we have to do the yards, et cetera. And one of the things that we had made, or I thought we had made abundantly clear at the start, was we would vacate that property as soon as possible to potentially have that developed to then bring that valuation onto the city tax rolls, as well as continue to follow and adhere to our strategic plan, which in the downtown strategic plan, as Bob's going to lay out here, we had a small neighborhood being developed on that, what is the northwest side of the downtown, the last northwest corner of the downtown area, to not just beautify that, but still lock in there forever that would be a residential area of downtown to continue to support our local businesses. So thank you for allowing me that little bit of grace with the background. And Mr. Harris and Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you two.
Go ahead, Beth.
Okay, here I go. So we've seen you've been summarized on the RFP. The police and fire safety building is under construction as we speak. We're looking at perhaps September of 26 for vacation and move into the new site. And so the RFP, going with the mayor's direction, is to post this next mid-July and end up with a selection date by the October 21st council meeting. It's based on the downtown plan, and I just have the little sample from the downtown plan for this block up here. Again, it's, contrary to some opinions, there was some good thought and discussion that went into these plan recommendations. And as the mayor pointed out, it's the establishment in this corner of downtown on this frontage of Wisconsin Street. This is a kind of a lower scale residential neighborhood downtown. So we were asking for townhome development. And I just want to point out a couple things. I mean, this is kind of a unique location. With these RFPs, you kind of want to goose up your community a little bit. And there just are not a lot of places that have these kind of amenities 2-3 blocks away. And then taking a longer view, 2 hours from, 2 hours to Union Station in Chicago, 2 hours to Madison, UW-Madison, 2 hours to Door County. So I think, and given what I'm receiving already, I'm getting a lot of initial interest for the RFP for this type of specific use. And really looking forward to see what kind of reply we get if we go ahead and release this in mid-July.
Questions or wonderings for Bob? It was reviewed at Planning Commission. Mr. Gasper?
So we're including the parcel on the southeast corner of Jackson and Milwaukee with this development. That's a former lift station site. Are we expecting something to be developed there, or is that going to be maintained kind of as a quasi park?
I would say the latter. I think the RFP calls for that block, but depending on what we get back and through the process, we'll deal with that.
So you think it's likely we'll end up detaching that and just holding
I think
on
what
to
you'll
it,
see
or?
is, it's a perhaps, but I think what you see in the, in the concept site plan is, what we're primarily asking for.
That's at the top of the hill?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we have like a plaque up there. Is that the one to Mayor Lambert or something?
Yeah, because that's with the bench.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. My only other comment on it is, I guess personally, I wouldn't be opposed if there was some limited commercial or office type use thrown in with this too, because, we know right now downtown does not have much in open commercial spaces available. So, but I think overall residential is the right approach.
Thank you. Any other questions, wonderings? Mr. Attorney?
This is actually related to something that Mike just asked you, but I was going to ask the same thing about our zoning for that area seems to allow that commercial mix. So are we okay to just say that we much prefer a residential thing? And if that comes in, can we go with that? I'm a little confused about what they can actually, this seems to say we want residential. And I agree with that, but.
Yeah, and Bob can probably speak to this better, but the beauty of an RFP is they can respond however they want. I mean, we have a request for proposal that's pretty specific. I think there are some other developments potentially coming up here in the next few weeks too that could inform what we would want here as well. So, I mean, I think with the RFP, Bob, it doesn't prohibit them from coming in and saying lower level commercial on the corner or residential, does it?
It doesn't prohibit it, but we are asking for
Residential.
residential, yeah.
Yeah.
But, if I may, to expand on your question about mixed uses, my recommendation is, and my thought is, stick to the plan. If you go a little deeper into the plan, you'll see, kind of downtown divided up in these little areas or districts. And the area we're talking about is largely lower slung residential in nature. And then the plan does kind of identify where those active ground floor uses should take place. And the theory is, and really in practice should be, that we really want to kind of concentrate our retail, commercial, office, our fab uses, food and beverage uses, to the existing corridors and areas of downtown rather than dilute it. Quite frankly, I think the density, the residential density and the foot traffic density just does not support mixed use everywhere in downtown. So I think is focus on the strength. And I think if there would be any creep of commercial use or mixed use, I think it'd probably be more on the block to the south, where we kind of have those existing structures, both the the funeral home, and then the what is the Edward Jones building. And I think those are buildings that really lend themselves quite well to adaptive reuse if there was commercial, kind of leaking west from Main Street or up from Grand. And I think these buildings really lend themselves to readaption. I think looking at the funeral pools up on the upper image on the top, we see the funeral home and then the drive-in with the hearse. Below is an example of a, similar funeral home in Milwaukee. And this has got 4 or 5 different uses in there. It was a funeral home, obviously. Now it has the people that own the Stella's hair salon live upstairs. There's a massage. There's a chiropractor business in there, and I think these are really quite adaptable uses. So that's my position, and that's my recommendation and my thoughts on mixed use in this particular block.
Thanks, Bob. Ms. Miller, did you have a question? Okay. Is there anyone willing then to make a motion to approve the subject RFP for developer solicitation as presented, just to begin the process?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the motion carries. All right, that brings us into public comments and appearances before we potentially go into closed session. Are there any public comments or appearances this evening before we move on? All right, seeing none then. The next agenda item then is the discussion and possible motion to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.851E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public property, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, specifically to discuss negotiation strategies related to a potential development agreement with Vantage Data Centers, LLC. Is there someone willing to make such motion?
So moved.
Moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. That is a voice vote by ward. Ward 1. Aye. Ward 2. Aye. Ward 3.
Aye.
Ward 4. Aye. Ward 5. Aye. Ward 6. Aye. Ward 7.
Aye.
Ward 8. All right. I'm going to ask to clear the council chambers because we're going to be meeting in here this evening. So if everyone could step out in the hallway till we come out of closed session, I would appreciate it. We are now in closed session.